Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Human Skull Necklace. A terrifying necklace made from a human skull was recently discovered in a warrior's tomb in Belize. This extremely disturbing piece of ancient jewelry may help scientists better understand what happened in the final days of the collapse of the Maya civilization. The skull necklace was literally made from a complete human skull that was worn around a warrior's neck. The skull had small holes drilled into it, probably to hold things like decorative feathers. There were then holes around the jaws that were used for a leather strap to keep the skull dangling from the warrior's neck. Plus, the back of the head was sawed off flat so that the skull would lay comfortably against the warrior's chest while they were wearing it. The tomb of the warrior with the skull necklace was uncovered in the city of Pakbitun, deep in the jungle. He must have been a locally renowned warrior to have been buried with such a mighty necklace. These types of trophies were only given to the most brutal warriors in the Maya kingdom. As for how the skull necklace is helping to understand the collapse of the Maya people, it's because scientists believe it's direct proof that the Maya had a violent end after becoming obsessed with warfare. This skull dates back to around the 9th century, just before the ancient city of Pakbitun was abandoned forever. Historians aren't exactly sure what happened, but they know the final century of Maya rule was bathed in blood. Number 9. The Tomb of Sidomara. In the year 1882, Sir C.W. Wilson, a consul general from Britain visiting the Anatolia region of what is today Turkey, stumbled upon a mysterious sarcophagus. At the time, he didn't really know how valuable the sarcophagus was. Wilson was flabbergasted by how visually stunning the amazing artwork was on the sarcophagus, since it was decorated in typical Roman fashion with carved figures across its every side. Based on this artwork, it was dated to the 3rd century when Rome still ruled Anatolia. Since he couldn't bring it back with him to Britain, he broke off the head of an infant figure carved on the sarcophagus and took that instead, reburying the rest for later. It wasn't found again for another almost 2 decades. Today, the Roman sarcophagus of Sidomara is housed at the Archaeology Museum of Konya. What's truly interesting about it is that the scenes depicted on its sides have not been consistently interpreted. It's believed the 9 women figures carved with immaculate precision are supposed to represent the 9 muses from Greek mythology. They are weeping and mourning the unnamed warrior who died and was buried inside the sarcophagus, just as they cried and mourned for the legendary warrior Achilles when he was killed during the Trojan War. However, the identity of who was inside the sarcophagus is still unknown. Number 8. Siberian Princess Tattoos. The ancient mummy of a mysterious young woman uncovered in Siberia, known as the Ukok Princess, is finally revealing some of her secrets. She was discovered about 20 years ago by scientists buried on the Ukok Plateau, over 7,000 feet up in the Altai Mountains. This is a region of Russia that borders Mongolia, China, and Kazakhstan. The Ukok princess was likely part of a group of people called the Pazyryk. The Pazyryk were nomads who ruled the area over 2,500 years ago. Her tomb was discovered underneath the permafrost, complete with some of the most impressive grave goods ever found in a woman's tomb anywhere on Earth. She was buried with 6 horses, all of them saddled and bridled and ready for use in the afterlife. She was also found with a small container that had cannabis in it. This suggests that Pazyryk may have been habitual users, or at least used it during special ceremonies. But perhaps the most amazing part about the Ukok princess is that she was covered in tattoos. It was just recently that researchers were finally able to recreate all the tattoos found inked onto her flesh, perfectly preserved because she had been buried underneath the Siberian ice. According to the Siberian Times, her tattoos are more intricate and complicated and arguably more beautiful than any other ancient tattoos found to date. Sure, Otzi the Iceman found in the Italian Alps had older tattoos, but the princesses are far more intricate. What really stunned researchers is just how similar they are to the tattoos of today. She had a bizarre dragon-like creature tattooed on her left shoulder, a whole sleeve going down her left arm, and she would have looked perfectly ordinary hanging out in any modern tattoo shop. Number 7. An ancient civilization. An archaeological dig in Bahrain has uncovered what might be one of the oldest civilizations in history. According to the BBC, the civilization is known as the Dilmun culture, of which scientists know pretty much nothing about. The archaeological site where the dig took place is called Sar, named after a nearby village. So far, they have divided the settlement into two distinct zones, a residential area and a cemetery where the local people buried their dead loved ones. Salman al-Mahari, the archaeologist in charge of the dig, explained that he and his team have already uncovered a lot of interesting information about daily life here. Finally, because this ancient civilization has been an enigma. They have found an altar in the center of the city that was once flanked by copper pillars, probably used in ritual ceremonies. They also found deep wells hemmed in by high stone walls, with the wells being fed by underground springs. It was here that the locals would give praise to the Sumerian deity Enki, the god of water and wisdom. The Dilmun culture dates back to the 3rd century BC. The city of Sar was a major trading route between the equally mysterious Indus Valley culture in India and the mega-kingdoms of Mesopotamia. The Dilmun people were just as important as these other two cultures in ancient times. They just didn't leave behind grand structures like in Mesopotamia that archaeologists could investigate. This has caused them to be a little left behind in the history books. Hopefully, more digging will take place soon to reveal even more about the Dilmun culture. Number 6. Ancient Roman weapons. A stash of ancient Roman weapons was recently unearthed at the prehistoric settlement of Son Catlar on the Spanish island of Menorca. Occupation of this archaeological site goes back to around 2000 BC, or over 4,000 years ago. Humans have been enjoying this Mediterranean island for thousands of years. It was continuously occupied all the way into the late Roman period, when the empire started to decline. It was at one point enclosed by a massive wall nearly 3,000 feet long, meant to protect the settlement that was about 2.4 acres large. The most recent excavations were done by the Institute for Research Archaeology and Historical Heritage. They had to take a break because of COVID, but got back to work just a little while ago and have already found quite a lot. The Roman military weapons that they literally just uncovered date back to around 100 BC. These weapons include things like projectiles, knives, arrowheads, and even surgical tools. These ancient surgical tools would have been used to help treat wounded soldiers during battles. It's believed that the Romans greatly valued this site as a strategic position, and soldiers would often bury equipment of high value to honor the place, leaving a treasure trove behind for us to find thousands of years later. Number 5. Pits of Sacrifice. 6 giant pits once used in sacrifices have been discovered in China, related to a mysterious kingdom that scientists only recently identified. These 6 sacrificial pits were found at the ancient Chinese city of Sanxingdui, located nearly 1,000 miles from Beijing. Within the pits, researchers pulled out about 500 artifacts, including strange masks made of gold and bronze that seem to depict unearthly monsters. The masks and other artifacts date back to about 3,000 years ago, before the Romans even started growing their own empire. The ancient kingdom of Shu would have been ruling this area of China at that time, yet they never mentioned anything about the city of Sanxingdui. In fact, there is no mention of the city anywhere, which is why scientists are so shocked by these newest discoveries. From what they can gather, it was a major city, perhaps the biggest in the region. According to researcher Lei Yu, the bronze and gold artifacts are designed unlike any other relics found in ancient China. Perhaps the most unusual part about the pits of sacrifice is that scientists have not found any human remains inside them. But this doesn't mean they weren't used as part of a sacrificial ritual. Instead, researchers believe the people who lived here incinerated their dead until their bones had turned to ash. Only then were they dumped inside the sacrificial pits, along with heaps of jade, gold, and bronze objects. The issue is that nobody can figure out why the people did this, or really, where the Sanxingdui people even came from. Number 4. Alexander the Great. A new archaeological dig in Egypt has uncovered an amazing statue of Alexander the Great from 2,200 years ago. Alexander III of Macedon is still remembered as one of the greatest military leaders in human history. Born in 356 BC, he was responsible for defeating the Persian ruler King Darius III, and he conquered much of Western Asia and northeastern Africa. The great city he founded in Egypt, Alexandria, grew to be the second most powerful city anywhere in the Mediterranean after Rome. The archaeological team was digging in a residential zone in Alexandria in an old part of the city they say was a trade center during the years after Alexander's death. They had been digging for 9 months before they uncovered an alabaster bust of the city's founder. Mostafa Waziri, who was involved with the dig, said the area was active for about 200 years starting in the 4th century. The statue may have been displayed at a rest stop for travelers, the ruins of which archaeologists excavated to discover old coins, fishing tools, pottery, and other miscellaneous items. These items could have been sold to travelers moving through Alexandria to parts unknown. The bust of the great man himself was likely just decorative, like having a dinner plate with a dead president's face on it. Number 3. Mysterious Martyr. In Israel, a church from the Byzantine era was recently unearthed with a mysterious past. It wasn't the church itself that caught the attention of archaeologists, but rather the fact that it was dedicated to an unknown martyr. The church dates back 1,500 years, found with incredibly beautiful mosaics from the 6th century. However, many of the mosaics that could have shown some light on the mystery of the church were discovered defaced or purposely smashed apart. Archaeologists also found an inscription written in Greek claiming the church was dedicated to a glorious martyr. However, there are no clues as to who that martyr may have been. At the time the church was built, the Byzantine Empire was in full control of Israel. It was also a time when the influence of the church was complete across much of the world. It was around this time when Islam began spreading throughout the region. The church was probably constructed around 578. Israel was taken over by the Islamic Rashidun Caliphate somewhere around 634, and the church was ultimately abandoned over 300 years later in the 10th century. Whoever this mysterious martyr was, whoever was so important that they had a church dedicated to them, is still a total mystery. Unfortunately, their name has now been lost to history, and the search is on to figure out who it was. Number 2. Lost Burial of the Queen. Archaeologists in England believe they may have just found the last remains of a monastery from the 8th century. The monastery dates back to the Anglo-Saxon days of England and to the rule of a mysterious Queen of Mercia. Mercia was one of the great kingdoms of England in the early Middle Ages, about 1,300 years ago. The Kingdom of Mercia was right across the street from the Kingdom of East Anglia. The most famous ruler of Mercia was King Offa, who reigned from between 757 and 796. After the king died, rule was handed over to his wife, Queen Sinithryth. To this day, she is one of the most influential female leaders in history. She was the only Anglo-Saxon woman to ever have her face stamped on a coin. She also had genuine status and influence over the proceedings of the kingdom, something the other queens of Europe didn't have. It was from this recently found monastery that Queen Sinithryth ruled after the death of the king. Small pieces of the structure were found underneath a modern parish church that was built on top of it. Archaeologists have found several pieces of ancient everyday items, from bronze bracelets to pieces of pottery. They believe Queen Sinithryth may even be buried somewhere underneath the parish floorboards. Number 1. Mysterious Moche Ruins. Recent excavations in Peru have uncovered evidence of the ancient Moche people who came before the famous Inca Empire. The team of scientists unearthed ruins that they believe belong to the Moche civilization. These people used to rule the entire northern coast of Peru and were known for their sophistication. They built immense pyramids that are still there today, they farmed the land, and like other South American cultures, they glorified human sacrifice. The newest discovery came from the archaeological site of Huaca Limón de Ucupe. 2 rooms were uncovered that were likely used for political debates and grand feasts. The archaeologists uncovered a staircase leading up to a banquet hall where 2 thrones face each other. They believe this impressive banquet hall would have been where the ruler of the city met with outside leaders to discuss important issues over food. The second room was found attached to the banquet hall. Inside the room is a circular podium that was used by the ruler of the city to make important announcements. In other words, they feasted in one room, discussed what was going to happen, and then the local leader made his proclamations in the adjoining chamber while standing over his subordinates on a grand podium. What this goes to show is that the Moche, who ruled from between 100 to 700 AD, had a very complex political society, highly advanced for the time. Thanks for watching! Which of these crazy discoveries did you find the most interesting? Which one do you want to learn more about? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you later. Bye!